Hello, it's your friend Emma. Welcome back to How to Smash the Motherhood Penalty, where I talk to guests who are really interested in changing the system and how we actually change the system. Today, I am very excited to introduce to you Davinnia Tan. Davinnia is an employment relations leader who has served as a member of the Employment Relations Authority, an independent reviewer of ACC decisions, and a peer reviewer for workplace investigations, deciding, reviewing, and resolving workplace disputes from multiple sides of the system. Clearly very clever. Very clever. It was inside the ERA she became the second member ever in its 25-year history to have a baby while serving as a member. It was navigating new motherhood while sitting in judgment on other people's workplace battles that she got a very front row education into how much work Aotearoa's institutions still have to do when it comes to caregiving. To toku that. Naively, she assumed the system was further along. It was not. Davinnia has written these beautiful words, and I love them. Outside her day-to-day work, she writes Ngākau Reworked, exploring the motherhood penalty, matrescence, and the system still pretending caregiving is a nice to have, in quotes, with a tikanga-informed lens and a healthy dose of surely we can do better than this. And she sounds exactly like the person we need to have on the podcast. Kia ora, welcome, Davinnia. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
Well, kia ora, Emma. Thanks so much for having me here. It is a real privilege, so thank you very much for that. That's a really good summary. I think that's a really good place to start. Yes.
Cool. So what I thought I'd open up with, and I ask this question to most of my guests, is, and you've kind of picked up on it a little bit in your intro, but you know, when I say the words motherhood penalty, I'm wondering what comes up for you. And I like to talk about this because it's quite a confronting word, you know, because for me, obviously, being a mum, and I have to reinforce this with my 3 children who know the work I do, it's the biggest privilege of my life. And so it's a really confronting word. But when I say the words motherhood penalty to you, what comes up for you?
Well, the first time I really felt it was when I had to leave my job as a member on the Employment Relations Authority. People might argue it's a choice, but the short story is I requested a 4-day work week and was declined with no reasons proactively provided to me. So the choice was to put my 1-year-old in full-time daycare or leave my job so I could have the extra day with him. And, you know, I should add as well that as a member of the Employment Relations Authority, I'm a statutory officer, which means that legally I'm not an employee, I'm not a contractor. By law, I have no rights under the Parental Leave and Employment Act, which means that all the parental leave I took is not covered under the law, which means it's unpaid. So my specific terms and conditions only gave me 1 month paid, and everything else was unpaid. So I had to return after 6 months for financial reasons. And on top of that, a very kind colleague, when I first returned after 6 months, actually allowed me to work from her private office so that I could express my milk. But for some reason, after my son turned 1, I got an email to say, right, you've got to return her office, but you can use the CCTV hearing rooms to pump your milk. You can just cover the screens up. So that was a huge shock to me. So quite a number of things that was really quite difficult to digest, especially at an institution where I naively thought would actually hold the gold standard in terms of these types of issues. Yeah. You know, I didn't have a child essentially to have him raised full time by daycare. I didn't have a child for this reason. So I left because being a mother is my most important role. So that is the motherhood penalty. I think.
That I think that is, when I hear you talk that back, when I say motherhood penalty, what comes up for you is you paid the penalty. It was framed up as a choice for you to leave. But, and it's a story so common, is it really a choice, right? Like, how might we be able to work 4 days a week and still have a job? How might we be able to pump milk in a way that feels okay for us and still have a job?
Yeah.
And what I'm curious about was this a surprise to you? Did you know about the motherhood penalty? I don't know if you're partnered, but had you spoken about it with your partner? Like, what happens before you became a parent? What were your expectations of this time?
Honestly, I was so naive. Firstly, as an immigrant to New Zealand, I moved here at the age of 14 back in 97. And, I was in Nelson in boarding school, but I never ever felt marginalized for being an immigrant, for being Asian, for being a woman. None of those. Never ever felt it. But then suddenly when I became a mum, it was like this. I was a burden to a society. That was the way I was made to feel. And work-wise, I had to ask for things. I was suddenly a pain in the butt. And you really feel it. And I think when you're a mother going through the first few months especially, or the first year, as we know matrescence, there is so much research on that now. We're already battling all of those things. And so when you enter a workplace and you have all these added issues which are causing unnecessary stress, it's not good. It's not good. Yeah. I was shocked.
You were that's the thing. You were shocked. Like, your experience before becoming a parent, even though there could have been things that you battled into, you didn't face any barriers. You didn't really face any battles, and becoming a mother was the big shock, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a common experience. So if anyone who's listening to this, just know you are not alone. I remember I did a post on Instagram a while ago on the cost of school holiday programs and after school care, right?
Yeah.
And I had a lot of comments on the post from, that whole like, well, if you didn't want children, you shouldn't have had them kind of thing.
Yeah. So short-sighted.
And it's like one of my comments, the comments that came on the page was, well, didn't you know these costs before you had children? And I think the point is, we don't.
No, we don't. But also, why should it stop us? Why should it stop us? As we know now as well, we have an aging population. Costs keep rising. Even if you know what the costs are now, you don't know what they're going to be like next year or the year after. Things change. Governments change, things change.
Yeah. And I just think that it is expensive. And, as you say, declining birth rate, below repopulation levels, something needs to happen. So you had this experience, and what made it important for you to start writing about this? Because you've got a Substack, you have an Instagram account. It's how I came across you. I really identified with your content for Ngākau Reworked. What makes it important for you to write and have a voice on this?
Well, firstly, I found writing as an outlet, so it was really cathartic for me as well. And there's a lot of other stuff that is probably not publishable that I just write. But I think just having a front row seat, firstly, my own lived experience, but also the cases that I saw. Often as a member at the authority, you see where relationships start to really fracture. And a lot of the time it's, for example, with the mums that come across, it might be a constructive dismissal case or whatever, or an allegation of bullying. But when you actually look between the lines, if you read between the lines, you can actually see, well, this was someone actually screaming out for a little bit more support as a mum of three, for example. One of the most frustrating things as a member is also the Parental Leave and Employment Protection Act. So how you have to qualify, you have to have worked, I think, for 26 weeks prior before you qualify for paid parental leave. And a lot of mums would come across my desk that had baby. As we know, you can get pregnant in less than 6 months after having your baby. But unfortunately, if you've been on leave, then you don't qualify because you have to have worked 26 weeks. So there are lots of these little issues that really sort of, it just didn't make sense for me from a systemic point of view. If we say we value life and we value caregiving, which clearly is not seen within the legal or policy infrastructure, there is a real lack of it. But on the flip side, and maybe I'll go into a little bit more detail on this, but while I had this experience, my husband, on the other hand, had a wonderful employer. They proactively asked him, hey, you're having a baby, what kind of support do you need? And had a really honest, upfront conversation of it. And in fact, my husband's workplace was part of my village when we had our son. They were our village. If not for my husband's employer, we would have just crumbled. They, I think, gave him 4 weeks paid when we had our son. And then they said to him, you just work as flexibly as you need to. Don't feel the need to come in, etc. So that meant that when I went for a 20-minute walk 2 weeks after my C-section and almost had a hemorrhage, my husband was there to pick up the pieces. It meant that he was there to hold my hand when we had to take my son for his first vaccination. It meant a lot of things. It meant that I could recover. And it was hard. It was still hard. But imagine if I didn't have that. And most people don't have that. And so for me, that was a real life experience or example of, you know, what you and Stephanie Powell have chatted a lot about as well, which is the need for paid partners leave. That is not something that mum has that she transfers, and one that, you know, both parents can take concurrently at the same time. So, yeah.
Wow. That's, I mean, when I hear you talk that back, Davinnia, that impact that that village had on you, it's life-changing.
Yeah. Yep. I really credit my husband's leaders for that. And I say leaders because this was an organization that really lived and breathed Te Ao Māori values as well. So at the leadership, at the CE level, there was a CE and a kaumātua, and they made decisions together, really valuing people first. What's ironic, though, is that this role model of an employer then got disestablished as part of the government's reforms. So, you know, quite a tragedy, I think.
Yeah, that feels like a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and, you know, so again, listening to what you've just shared there, like what's made it important for you to have a voice on this, to write on this, is two things. When you have been working in the system, you saw from front row seats the disconnect between we value people, we value families, but actually reading between the lines of these cases, do we really? And then your lived experience of the difference it does make when we can have supportive employers. And I think your observation of, I really like your words. I don't know whether it was reading between the lines or looking between the lines. It's a little bit like the glass ceiling, right? Like you can't really see it's there, but it's really hard to get through. And I think I've actually worked with a number of mums who have been disestablished or made redundant, and you can't quite put your finger on it, but it feels like it's because you were a mum. Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you think about that?
I think, to be honest, I do think that, and this is why I think we need more of a proper infrastructure to support it. Because when you hear of good situations, it's usually because someone had a really good leader or good manager, but the organization forgets that that manager or leader needs support as well. And so if it comes down to that manager that's just been confronted by, oh crap, this person, I've just got a full complement and I've got two staff members that are wanting to take parental leave. You know, it is stressful. I do want to acknowledge that it is a stressful situation operationally for that manager. And so that's why I feel that if we think outside the box a little bit better in terms of what workplace policies could look like, what the systemic infrastructure is, then that kind of removes a little bit of that pressure, I think, on that person. And what I mean by that are, things like being a little bit more innovative, as you have also previously mentioned about job design. Could we have more job shares in certain jobs? Could we look at removing the requirement for 40-hour week, that sort of thing in certain roles, because it's about output and not really about desk time.
Yeah.
So I think we can just think, if we just took the time, if organizations just took the time to sit down and just be a little bit more creative with their people strategy,
Yeah.
I think that we could do a lot more in this space and support people and not worry about it when people have a baby, because that's life, that's normal. You should, it's just part of life. So we just need to have the infrastructure there.
Yeah, think a bit more creatively, give people, leaders support. And I have a lot of empathy for leaders because, what we're asking them to do is to disrupt a system when we're asking to work 4 days a week, or we're asking to work school hours. And so how are we supporting them to have a reinvention of job design, to be more creative when they're already under pressure to deliver so much? And I don't think we put enough support or scaffolding around leaders. And so that defaults into computer says no.
Yeah.
The
too hard basket.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's like, if that doesn't change, I don't know what will change with equity at work, because we just need a reimagination of the workplace. I mean, that's all we need.
Yeah. But if we just, if we just gave it a little bit of time to give that space to think about these things, I think we could get there. I mean, if you look at Sweden, for example, they started their reforms back in 1974. It wasn't an overnight thing, and Sweden is the gold standard in terms of how they support gender equality in workplaces and parental supports. So, yeah.
It can be done.
It can be done. And actually, so I did a bit of research prior to coming on, because I've always said, well, Sweden, Sweden, but we know Rome wasn't built in a day. And doing my research, it shows that Sweden actually started their reforms back in 1974. So they became the first country to introduce gender-neutral paid parental leave. But they found that simply offering leave to fathers wasn't enough, as most dads weren't taking it. So from 95 onwards, they introduced a use it or lose it leave that reserved specifically for each parent. And the evidence that followed showed that fathers took substantially more leave when they had dedicated time that couldn't be transferred to their partner. Researchers have also found longer-term benefits around shared caregiving, maternal well-being, and even attitudes about gender roles in the next generation. So it's not a perfect case study, and the evidence on women's career outcomes is more mixed. But as a practical example of policy changing parental behavior, I think Sweden, is held up as one of the strongest examples. But what that tells me is that New Zealand is not just behind, it is severely lagging behind. It's not a matter of just throwing more money at parents or extending leave by a few weeks. I just don't think it's a holistic way to address the real issue. But what really gets me quite annoyed as well is that every 3 years we see these issues politicized.
Yeah.
And that really annoys me, because at the end of the day, a child is at stake here. Yeah.
And the health and well-being of of the parents as well, right?
Yeah.
And I really love that point. We need a holistic solution. And it's something I've been talking about recently on the podcast around, who is advocating for working parents, and maybe I need to be the minister of working parents and all that kind of stuff, hashtag reach out to my DMs, Christopher Luxon. No, but when you're talking about this holistic approach and how, where is New Zealand on that? One thing I have just recently become aware of is another marker that we don't value caregiving in this country is that the last time this country actually even measured the motherhood penalty was 2018.
Wow.
And we have never measured the experience of a working dad. So all the statistics that I use in my work, I do workshops every week with returning parents. I use Australian statistics. There's fantastic working family commissions in Australia. They're quite deep into the dad experience. And if you don't measure it, you can't manage it.
Yeah.
And that's my question is, why are we not measuring, the impact of the cost of childcare about women returning to the workforce? How much unpaid work do women do compared to men? How many women are off-ramping their careers because they can't work 4 days a week? And how many dads are facing stigma to their career when they are to flexible working? Like, we don't measure that.
No.
Like, did you know that? Like, did you know that?
I only knew that following establishing my Ngākau Reworked account and being connected with other mums. But like you say, a lot of it is in Australia or the UK. Yeah, there's nothing here. And people forget we are pumping money into the economy. I mean, our costs go up. And it's so funny because I remember being really stressed out at the hospital when we were leaving, and they said, "Oh, don't worry, all you have to do is just keep your baby warm, keep them fed, and love them." Well, to keep my baby warm, well, heating, especially in New Zealand, costs. And if mum is not fed, if mum is stressed, the breast milk doesn't come. And some women can't breastfeed. Formula costs money. And then you've got the whole postpartum baby blues. For many, they suffer from postpartum depression as well. There's a lot of stuff that happens. So it sounds simple on paper, but it's actually not. It still costs. Yeah.
Oh, at a time when you have no money.
Yeah, at a time when you have no money, and daycare costs. I think we pay $380 a week, so that's about 18 grand a year, and that's just for a 4-day attendance.
And to your point around when you give mothers or parents money, they pump it back into the economy. It's a very similar observation I learnt from this excellent podcast called Shortchanged, which is all about the Pay Equity Amendment Bill situationship. And one of the things I learnt from that is that if you look at giving women more money as opposed to like giving landlords more money, when you give women more money, they spend it in their local community.
That's right.
They spend it on their families.
That's right.
So that injects the economy. And I think the same with parents, right? Like when I was little, I remember my mum used to get a family benefit payment every week for us, like one per kid. And there's just nothing like that now.
No, and you're right. We spend it on communities, don't we? I mean, I think I've bought more cheese scones and fluffies and flat whites since becoming a mum than when I was at work pre-motherhood.
Oh, let's be clear. Toasted cheese scones and a long black, but with a lot of butter on the cheese scone. That was the only way I got through sleep deprivation. Let's be clear.
I wish our cafes would give mums and dads discounts. I said to my husband, we should have like a card, or like reduced public transport fares or free. Because, I remember I would walk my son in the front pack for hours so he would sleep, and at times you get so tired you jump on a bus and the bouncing of the bus would like get him to sleep. So
maybe just whole buses with sleeping mums and babies. That would be a good idea. There we go. We've got policy things on the fly here. I love it.
But honestly, more seriously, I do think that we can do things like one of the common issues I keep hearing about, and I'm sure I'll get there in a couple of years' time, is that whole like school hours and working hours and how they're not aligned. And I know that is a really challenging one to tackle. But, a fair model could be something that, for example, gives all employees access to flexible start and finish times. Perhaps a reduced core hours window, for example, between 10 and 2 when everyone's available, but the ability to compress your hours across the week. We could do things like limited annual flexibility credits used for caregiving, study, volunteering, elder care, health needs, whatever your other life responsibilities are. An outcomes-based performance measure rather than a desk time measure.
Yeah.
I think something like that could also avoid the resentment that sometimes emerges when workplaces appear to value parents more than non-parents,
Mm.
which is not true, but
Mm.
that is sometimes a perception.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing I've been thinking about quite a lot as well is the emergence of Generation Z. So they're going to be the next generation of parents, and I think we need to start thinking a little bit more outside the box with some of these issues, because as it stands, and from what I've seen at the authority on cases I've decided on as well, people's expectations are changing quicker than the law. And the law isn't always on the right side of what society needs. So that means that we see people leave employers and countries. And, as the recent stats show as well, we've had an increase in unemployment. So if people are unemployed, the government loses taxes.
Mm.
So I think
Mm.
it's more important than I think a lot of people realize.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's got wide implications.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we've talked about a lot of system levers in
Yeah.
this conversation, right? That's going to smash the motherhood penalty. Um, but if I was going to give you a magic wand, because everyone on my podcast gets a magic wand, Davinia, and you think the magic wand would have the biggest impact in smashing the motherhood penalty, of which I can't really quote any New Zealand figures about it, but I also paid the motherhood penalty, so I know it to be true. What would you use your magic wand for?
This is so difficult because I want this magic wand to be limitless. Yeah, unconditional, never ending. But firstly, I didn't have a village. Our friends have become our whānau. My husband's workplace became our village. So what I would say is a village, you need a village at home, you need a village at work, we need a village as just part of societal attitudes and change of cultural norms. The other one as well, which I have to get behind, is paid partners leave. Big, big. I think that would be a real game changer. The other thing I would love to see as well, having experienced it myself, is more certainty around flexibility for return to work. So,
Mm.
yeah, something that is fluid, organic, and where employers as well are being proactive about what your options are and not leaving it up to the parent to have to search around for whatever policies they are or have to beg for flexibility. I
Mm.
think if employers can be educated in terms of matrescence and working out, anticipating what their parents' needs are before the parents come begging, I think that would be really helpful because, yeah, there's a lot of like whakama around that too. And I think employers need to turn their minds to that.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
not easy for a lot of people to ask for help. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually very hard to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. To toku that. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. My last one, which is probably a big, big ask, is for parental support, especially in the financial and health sectors, to be recognized internationally as a human right.
Mm.
I would love to see that because,
Mm.
like I said, at the end of the day, a child is at the end of it. So, if you
Mm.
look after the parent,
Mm.
you're giving that child the best starting point.
Mm.
Yeah.
Parental support to be recognized as a human right. And this is why I got Davinia on, because she's got some big ideas here. I
People
love
just need to
that.
execute them.
I love that. And also she's used her magic wand people for four things. So I don't know how good she is at counting, but she's done it. I really loved your idea of more consistency around flexibility, a consistent understanding of what is possible when it comes to flexibility. It is so inconsistent. It is such a reason why women come out of the workforce or don't go back into it. And
Hmm.
I've worked with many mums who are like, I don't want to leave my employer even though I'm getting bullied because it's 4 days a week
Yeah.
and I'll never get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
Uh, so, paid partner leave, amazing. And then the village. These are all amazing things to use your magic wand on. I think the village thing is such an interesting point because, again, when we're swimming in this soup and we're just trying to survive, we don't join all these dots up. And, you know, when I run workshops, one of the very first thing I say to my parents, mums and dads, and I run them all online, is I'll say, you know, we were never meant to do this alone.
No.
But so many of us are. And so many of us, even if we do have family in New Zealand, they're not in the same city. They are often still working. But so many of us now, our family are overseas.
Mm-hmm.
They don't live here.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're finding it hard, that's why. And what I love when I look at people's faces, when I say this, that they're like, oh, Emma's right. You know, like, it's like, because we don't join the dots up. We just think, oh, I'm doing a shit job at this. Like, I should be able to do this better. But we were never meant to do this alone.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We were never meant to do this alone. It is so hard, and you have to be, I mean, in a way, I'm really glad I had kids later. I'm in my 40s now, but yeah, because it is so hard. And I think I'm just really glad that I've had a bit of life experience to help me along as my husband as well. But, you know, I go to the playgrounds and I see kids sometimes with their grandparents, and I'm just full of just envy. Just they, you know, those parents are so blessed to have their own parents, not just from a help point of view, but for the child as well, because as we know, you know, it builds a healthy attachment for the child. And I think, you know, that's something that's always forefront of my mind, is the attachment. Yeah. So, but, you know, I'm just so grateful for my husband, to be honest. And to any dads that are listening that are on the fence, the one thing I will have to say is, if you are thinking about whether or not to take parental leave, please absolutely do it. Every father I know that has done it said it was the best thing that they've ever done, and the ones that didn't really regret it. So it is life-changing. And I think, you know, a lot of people think caregiving is really, really hard. Yeah, it is hard, but it's also the most bloody rewarding thing. It is so great. And, you know, my son is now 2.5 years old. I see the bond between him and my husband, and it is insane. So highly recommend it.
Oh, I love that. Well, kia ora, Davinnia. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little of your story. You know, sharing your story about returning to work, about becoming a mum, about the shock, but about your awakening, which I love. And I just think I want more people to be awake. That's what we want.
It's a blessing in disguise, to be honest, to be declined that 4-day work week.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Little did they know what started in you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a delight.
Yeah, ngā mihi mai oha.
This podcast was funded by Works for Everyone, a business that is dedicated to supporting working parents and to smashing the motherhood penalty. If this is also your jam, let's stay connected. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for us, Works for Everyone. And if you want more information on how we help businesses put a care wrap around their employees, check us out on worksforeveryone.co.nz. Or if none of these work for you, in the weekends you can find me, Emma McLean, the founder of Works for Everyone, in the queue at Pack and Save Royal Oak or Kmart St Luke's. Onwards!